I found the recording from the hidden camera installed in Grandma's living room, the tape that had been hidden for 12 years. When I fast-forwarded to the middle, the blood in my veins froze. My mother's voice, cold, deliberate. "If you keep living in this house, I won't stay quiet. One call, one signature, and you'll lose your freedom." My mother was the one who sent Grandma to a mental institution. For money. For the house. For her endless greed. My name is Noah Monroe. I'm 29 years old. But the story I'm telling you today started when I was just a 17-year-old boy living with my mom and grandma in a 2-story wooden house on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky. My grandma, Eleanor, was the strongest woman I'd ever known. Her entire life was tied to this house, every brick laid by my grandfather's hands. After he passed, the house became the only legacy she had. But to my mom, Linda, it wasn't just a place to live. It was property. It was money. It was power. It all started with little signs I didn't notice at first. Grandma began moving more slowly, sometimes forgetting to lock the door, sometimes even forgetting the date. I thought it was just old age, until one day she asked, "Noah, did you take my savings book? I left it in the drawer, and now it's gone." I panicked. "I never touched it, Grandma. Let me help you look." I searched every drawer in her room, but the savings book was really gone. Around the same time, I started noticing her medication was often changed, the old bottles thrown out before being finished, and the new ones had higher dosages than usual. One night, while going to get a drink of water, I accidentally overheard Mom talking on the phone. "Yes, I know, but I need to act fast. She can't stay here any longer. I want the process done within a week. Dr. Matthews has agreed to sign if needed." I was stunned. I had never heard Mom's voice sound so cold. I told my friend Sarah, and she suggested I install a camera to gather evidence. I hid a small camera inside the wall clock facing the living room where Mom usually made calls. After 2 weeks, I found a clip that made me shiver. "I've contacted St. Mary's Nursing Home. They have an open room. All we need is a mental certification, and my mother won't be able to come back here." That voice was my mother's. Every bit of trust I had shattered. I began watching her closely. Every night, I wrote in a journal everything Grandma said, everything I saw. I saw Mom mixing sleeping pills into her tea. I heard Grandma whisper in the night, "Noah, I'm not crazy. They want to take my house." One time, I saw Mom sitting with a strange man in the living room. I hid behind the curtain and listened. "You're the estate lawyer, right? I want to update the heir to the house. She's no longer in the right mind to decide." That's when I knew. Mom didn't just want to put Grandma away. She wanted total control over her assets. I had to stop it before it was too late. I decided to confront Mom directly. I brought the audio recording and played it in the kitchen. "I heard everything. I know what you're doing to Grandma." Mom stared at me, then gave a faint smile. "And what will you do?" "I'm the legal guardian. I have the authority. You're just a minor." I shouted, "You're destroying this family. You know she's not insane." Grandma heard and came out of her room, her voice trembling. "Linda, why would you do this to me?" Mom turned away without answering. The next morning, when I woke up, Grandma was gone. Mom said coldly, "I took her for evaluation. She needs special care. It's better for her there." I ran out the door, but everything was already done. Mom had taken the car early. I called Sarah and we went to St. Mary's Nursing Home. Grandma lay on a single bed, her eyes vacant. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "Noah, they don't believe me. They say I'm paranoid, but I remember everything. I know what Linda wants." I held her hand tightly. "I'll bring you home, I promise. But first, we have to prove Mom's wrongdoing." I found Dr. Matthews, the one who signed the admission papers. He refused to answer, citing confidentiality. But I left the recording and threatened legal action. The next day, he called back. I didn't know Linda had personal motives. I was just asked to confirm certain symptoms, but didn't review the file thoroughly. We started gathering evidence: the recording, my journal, testimony from a nurse who saw Mom mix medication. I contacted a lawyer named Rachel Kim, an advocate for elder rights. She took the case pro bono, saying my grandma deserved protection. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. I looked at Mom, still dressed elegantly, sitting cold as if nothing had happened, and I swore I wouldn't let Grandma rot another day in that home. I started with the camera. Reviewing all the memory card data, I found several clips of Mom talking to the doctor, repeating phrases like a script. Nighttime hallucinations, risk of self-harm, needs to be removed from familiar surroundings. I backed up everything. Sent a copy to Sarah, my only trustworthy friend. She said I should talk to a lawyer, but I knew if I made noise, Mom would destroy the evidence and move Grandma even further away. So I stayed silent for now. That night, while Mom was out at a party, I snuck into Grandma's room. In the nightstand drawer, I found something that made my heart race. A handwritten will with her fingerprint clearly stating, I, Eleanor Monroe, leave all my assets, including the house and land, to my only grandson, Noah Monroe, whom I trust most. But the date was 6 months ago. That meant Mom knew. Grandma had been prepared for a long time. Maybe that's why Mom rushed to put her in the institution, to isolate her, to invalidate the will. I took the original to her personal lawyer I found through an old card in the mailbox. He, a gray-haired man named Walter, looked at it, eyes wide. My God, I thought Eleanor had voided this when switching to the digital will at her daughter's request. But this is the last signed and notarized version. I was the witness. I asked, then why was she still admitted as mentally incompetent? Walter sighed. Because the new digital version was signed under Linda's pressure, just weeks before the hospitalization. I wasn't involved. I think she was deceived. I asked if he could testify in court. He nodded. If you're brave enough to bring this into the light, I'll stand by you. I left his office with a glimmer of hope. But that hope didn't last long. When I got home, everything was torn apart. The computer, memory cards, journal, all gone. The hidden camera was also missing. Mom sat in a chair, wine glass in hand, eyes chillingly cold. You think you're playing detective, Noah? I clenched my fists. I know everything, and I'm bringing Grandma back. She laughed, a dry, metallic sound. She's lived long enough, one house, a few old papers, worth betraying your own mother. I looked straight at her, the woman who gave birth to me, and for the first time in my life, I saw a stranger, a person capable of sacrificing her own mother for a house. I didn't betray you. You betrayed this family a long time ago. I left in the night, carrying only a copy of the footage I had sent to Sarah, and one determination. I would bring everything to light, even if the cost was the destruction of this entire family. But I didn't expect the real price to be far more brutal than I had imagined. 2 days later, I went to the nursing home with documents from attorney Walter, planning to meet with the board and request a review of my grandmother's legal status. But when I arrived, her room was empty. No more of the blue blanket she liked, no small wooden guitar by the window, not even the picture frame I gave her. I panicked and ran through the halls, asking the nurses, and finally one of them whispered, voice trembling, they moved her. This morning. The medical van came very early, no destination listed. I stood frozen. It felt like all the blood had been drained from my body. I called Sarah. No answer. Second time. Third. By the 5th try, her voice came through, shaking. Noah, someone just broke into my house. They took my computer, the hard drives, and they left a note. What? A handwritten note. Just 3 words. Stay out of it. My heart pounded, like a drum warning of a coming storm. I told Sarah to get out of the house immediately. She cried over the phone, saying she was hiding under the table, too afraid to move. They know where I work, Noah. They know my parents' names. I'm scared. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was exploding. Someone was watching us, not just my mother. This was an entire network, or at least she had hired someone to do this. And now, not only I, but Sarah too, was in danger. I drove to Sarah's place. On the way, I received a text from an unknown number. You have 24 hours. Stop looking for her, or someone else will disappear. I couldn't allow myself to feel fear. I used to think family love was an unbreakable bond, but now it was tightening around my neck, loop by loop. That night, I broke into my mother's old house, where I had lived as a child, where my grandma once raised me when my mother went to work. I found something, a strange bank statement under my mother's name, transferring money to a private facility on the outskirts of the state. And one prominent name, Ashgrove Private Mental Facility. That place didn't appear on any public medical maps. It was where people hid those they didn't want found. I knew I had to go there, but I also knew going alone was suicide. I called Walter, told him everything. He was silent for a long time, then said, "If you want to save Eleanor, we have to move fast. I'll get a court order using the will and medical records. But you need to hold on for at least 48 hours. Don't let them move her again." 48 hours. While my mother had money, power, and wouldn't hesitate to use any means. And I had only myself. But I had the truth. And my grandma, the only one who never abandoned me. Ashgrove was unlike any medical facility I had ever seen. Located deep in a dense pine forest more than 3 hours from the city, the building was covered in moss, tall-walled, with a black iron gate and cameras everywhere. No signage, no receptionists. Without GPS, I would have thought I'd stumbled into a secret prison. I wore an old shirt, thick glasses, and spoke in a shaky voice, claiming to be Raymond Hale, Eleanor's eldest son, there to confirm discharge procedures. Strangely, they didn't ask for ID. Maybe the Hale name was enough to open the gate. They led me to a grim waiting room, where flickering neon lights mixed with the stench of antiseptic and dampness. The records manager, a platinum-haired woman with vacant eyes, handed me a medication list for Eleanor. I skimmed through and choked. The dosage of antipsychotics was twice the standard: anti-seizure drugs, powerful sedatives, and morphine. I asked, "My mother, is she lucid?" The woman gave a cold smile. "No, Mr. Hale. She frequently screams about things that aren't real, like being kidnapped, forced to keep secrets about her son's death. It's very sad." My heart felt crushed. I knew that wasn't delusion. That was the truth. The truth someone didn't want her to speak. I stayed calm, asked to see my mother privately for 10 minutes, like last time. She hesitated, then led me down a long hallway where muffled cries leaked through every doorframe. Last room on the left, a heavy door. She unlocked it. I stepped inside and saw my grandmother, Eleanor, gaunt, hair silver and loose, wrists tied with soft fabric straps, her eyes vacant until she saw me. Then she gasped, trembling, "Noah?" I rushed to her, held her tight. She sobbed, her voice broken. "They inject something into me every night. I can't remember, but I know something's wrong. I heard your mother, she was on the phone, talking about your father's death, about a recording." I stepped back, stunned. "What recording?" She gripped my hand tightly, whispered, "It wasn't an accident, Noah. Your father, he found out your mother was embezzling, planned to take her to court. That night, she drove the car. Not him. She killed him, then staged the scene. And I'm the only one who knew." I felt a chill run through my body. My mother, the woman who always emphasized her sacrifice, had killed my father to silence him. Then locked away the only person who knew the secret, my grandma, in a remote mental facility, drugging her into insanity. I took photos of the prescriptions of my grandmother, recorded her words. But just then, an alarm rang out. Staff stormed in. I was dragged out of the room. A tall man in black leaned into my ear, growling, "Raymond Hale is dead, and you, if you ever set foot in here again, you'll follow him." I was shoved out the gate. No time to speak to her again. No way to promise her I'd come back. But I knew one thing. I wasn't backing down. Even if they dragged all of hell up, I didn't go home. After leaving Ashgrove, I drove through the night to a small motel on the outskirts of the city. My head was spinning. Eleanor's trembling whispers still echoed in my ears. It wasn't an accident. She killed him. I played the recording over and over, Grandma talking about the tape, a piece of evidence, maybe a conversation between her and my dad, or her and my mom. I knew if it existed, it was the key to unlocking the hellish truth about my mother. I started with my parents' old house, the home I grew up in, and after my father's death, my mother had it cleaned out, completely redecorated. But I remembered, my father had a private study, locked, and only he and Grandma had the key. I returned near midnight. The villa was cold. The lights in the living room were still on. My mother was there, sitting like a statue, wine glass in hand. She looked at me and smiled. "You're finally back. Good to see you're still alive." I didn't answer. I went straight up to the second floor. She followed. I stopped in front of my father's old study. The lock had been replaced. I pulled out a crowbar and pried it open. The door gave way. "Noah!" my mother shouted. "What are you doing?" I turned on the light. Dust covered the desk. The shelves were empty, but in the corner there was an old wooden cabinet untouched. I pulled it out. Beneath the floor mat was a small safe. My mother stepped in, her voice sharp as a blade. "Stop! That's not meant for you." I turned around, looked her in the eye. "You killed Dad. then locked Grandma in a psych ward to silence her. I spoke to her. I know everything. Her face went pale. But less than a second later, she smiled again, a cold, icy smile. She's been unstable for a long time. You shouldn't trust the words of a deranged woman, I smirked. And the recording? Is that a hallucination too? Her eyes froze. Her hand trembled as she gripped the wineglass tighter. I knelt down, opened the safe. My birth date, 0605, was the code. Inside was a USB drive, a thin journal, an unsent letter addressed to Noah, in my father's handwriting. I took everything and stepped out of the room. My mother shouted, "If you dare go public with that, I swear you'll regret it." I turned back, my voice low and sharp. "You killed Dad, but I'll bring him back through the truth." The next day, I brought the USB to a lawyer, an old friend of my father's, Mr. Marvin Trent. He checked it, and we fell silent. It contained a 17-minute recording, dated the day before my father died. "Claire, I won't cover this up anymore. If you embezzle 1 more cent from the charity fund, I'll take everything to my lawyer. No more reconciliation. I have the bank statements, the recording, and I'll send them to Eleanor if I die." Her voice, my mother's, was ice cold in the recording. "If you die, don't say stupid things like that, Richard. But if you truly want war, then be ready for the consequences." It was a threat. And less than 24 hours later, my father lost control on a mountain road. While my mother cried in front of the media, saying, "My husband always drove in the rain. He just wanted to get home early for his son's birthday." I submitted the recording, the journal, and the letter to Marvin. We began the lawsuit for manslaughter, embezzlement, and unlawful detention of an elder. The case unraveled like a snake shedding its skin. My mother had no way out. But the real battle had only begun. When the lawsuit hit the press, my mother hired 3 top law firms, presenting countless files that discredited Eleanor's mental stability, trying to blur the truth. I knew if Grandma didn't appear in court, if her testimony wasn't calm, painful, and precise, everything would collapse like smoke. I decided I had to get Eleanor out of Ashgrove, even if it cost me my own freedom. My father's recording had been submitted to the court. The media began sniffing around, but none of them knew that the strongest piece of evidence was locked behind concrete walls, drugged daily, and labeled a late-stage paranoid psychotic. My grandmother, Eleanor. If I couldn't bring her to testify, the entire case could be dismissed for lack of a living witness and insufficient legal confirmation of the victim's mental condition. And I knew my mother. She had enough power and money to alter any record. I went to see Sarah at her small photography studio in the suburbs. "I want to help," Sarah said the moment I laid out the plan. "Even if we have to break the law." I smiled faintly. Honestly, that was the first time I saw her not as the ex-girlfriend from the past, but as a woman ready to fight beside me, for the truth. We made a plan, detailed, step by step. Step 1, retrieve Eleanor's original medical records. Sarah used her media contacts in the healthcare world, tracked down a nurse who had worked at Ashgrove, Mary, who was fired for violating internal policies. At a secret cafe meeting, Mary revealed, "I got fired for opposing the doctor's overdose of haloperidol on Eleanor. She was lucid, spoke very clearly the first week she was admitted, then suddenly couldn't speak at all." Mary handed us a copy of the original records, printed secretly before the official files were altered. Step 2. Infiltrate Ashgrove at night. Here's the exact English translation of your text, with no additions or omissions. We studied the hospital layout. Ashgrove has 24/7 security, but there's a maintenance tunnel that connects from the service wing to the east basement, where the records are stored, and also near the special care unit where Grandma Eleanor is held. Mary provided an old ID and a security pass. Sarah and I disguised ourselves as emergency night shift janitors. 0 hour, 2:43 a.m. I pushed the utility cart. Sarah walked beside me holding a clipboard. Cold sweat trickled down my neck as we passed the hallway camera, but Mary had promised to cut the signal for 10 minutes. We arrived at room 217, the room where Eleanor lay, silent like a cold tomb. I opened the door. The yellow light spilled onto a familiar face, thinner, pale, but her eyes still held a glimmer. I whispered, "Grandma, I've come to get you." Eleanor teared up. I lifted her onto the wheelchair. Sarah removed the IV line, cut the magnetic lock. As we pushed her down the hallway, my heart pounded like a war drum. A footstep echoed behind us. Is someone there? We ran. Sarah opened the tunnel door. I pushed Grandma through, then closed it. The alarm blared, but as the door slammed shut behind us, I knew we had made it out. 3 days later, the court held a hearing. The media packed the room. Eleanor, lucid, in a thin white gown, sat on the witness stand. When asked, "Do you confirm the statement that your daughter-in-law, Linda Monroe, threatened, poisoned, and unlawfully confined you?" She replied, her voice clear, "Yes, and she killed my son. She was my daughter-in-law, but also a murderer." The courtroom fell into dead silence. She pulled another recording from her pocket, the last one my father had sent her privately via mailbox, just 2 hours before his death. It ended with the words, "If my son knew the truth, he would never forgive his mother." My mother sat silently in the defendant's dock. No more rage, no more defiance, just a woman who had lost, and for the first time, she no longer controlled anything. That morning, the courtroom felt as cold as an ice cellar. I sat in the front row, gripping my father's pendant. Sarah sat beside me, eyes fixed on the dock where Mom, Linda Monroe, was seated. She said nothing, didn't cry, didn't tremble. Still the indifferent face of the woman who once sowed fear throughout our family. The indictment was 11 pages long. Forgery of medical documents, forced hospitalization, abuse of guardianship power, asset deprivation, illegal confinement of my grandmother for over 3 years. The prosecutor presented testimonies from me, from Sarah, and especially the audio recording from my father's phone, where he begged my mother to stop before things became irreparable. Finally, the judge struck the gavel. My mother was sentenced to 12 years in prison and permanently stripped of her guardianship rights. The room held its breath. I thought I had won, that everything was over. But as I stepped out of the courthouse, my mother's private lawyer ran up and handed me an envelope. Request to transfer Eleanor's estate back to Linda Monroe. Attached is the latest psychological evaluation, declaring Eleanor legally incompetent. I was speechless. The report was signed by Dr. Mary Turner, the very one who had helped me free Grandma. But the handwriting didn't match. I rushed to her clinic, only to be told she had been missing for 2 days. A cruel twist. Even though Mom was sentenced, her power hadn't ended. That night, I went to Ashgrove to pick up Grandma. They refused release. A temporary stay had been issued by the appeals court. I looked through the frosted glass and saw her sitting alone, eyes bewildered as if those 3 hellish years were returning. I punched the wall hard. No tears fell. It hurt too much to cry. A few days later, I received a letter from Mom, sent from prison. "Noah, you thought justice was the end? It's just a dull saw. It can't sever the deep roots of this family. You won a battle. But war doesn't end just because one falls. Remember, one doesn't need freedom to maintain control." I tore up the letter, but the final words stayed etched in my mind. I haven't lost. I'm just waiting. A few months later, I moved to a small town with Grandma, who was finally released after endless paperwork. We lived quietly, but every night I woke up haunted by one fear. What if Mom got out of prison? Or worse, what if she was never truly imprisoned at all? Sarah left, saying she couldn't keep living in a game where the rules could be bent at any time. I understood. One rainy afternoon, I sat on the porch watching Grandma water the plants. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Next time, it won't be your grandma." I gripped the phone tightly, looked up at the sky, and for the first time, I smiled. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I understood. Justice isn't something we wait for in court. Justice is choosing to live right, even knowing the darkness will always return. And I will wait, no matter how long, because if the game is still on, then I've never left the board. Noah didn't win completely, but he chose what was right, even knowing the price. And you, if you were Noah, what would you do? When justice isn't a court ruling, but a scar you carry for life, will you stay silent or keep standing? Could you ever forgive the one who gave you life if they betrayed you to the core? Leave a comment below. What do you think about this ending? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between truth and family? What does justice mean to you? If this story touched your heart, hit like, share the video, and subscribe to Family Scars so you won't miss the next story, where every emotion is told with soul. turn on the notification bell, because who knows, the next story might be the one you've been searching for. See you in the next video, and don't forget, in this world, sometimes the smallest light comes from those who once fell the hardest.